In this episode, we're discussing how to develop integrity and how to live life aligned with your values. If you've decided to click or watch this video or listen to the podcast, then perhaps you intuit that integrity is somehow crucial for personal growth, fulfillment, and healthy relationships. So we're going to be discussing this in depth today. Welcome to the show. My name is Jasper Brown. This is The Conscious Masculine, and I've been looking forward to discussing this topic with you guys in depth because integrity has been somehow a very crucial and integral part of my own growth and development. I have a long and tarnished history with integrity and how that's showed up in my own life, and particularly being very out of integrity with my values. And this has caused me a tremendous amount of sufferance and pain, a lot of regrets and things that I wish I didn't do, mistakes that I made. And in many ways, those decisions or choices or lack of integrity in my life is still costing me. It's still causing me pain. And that has taught me through the sufferance that I've endured that integrity is an extremely foundational, important principle that we need to follow in our lives. And as I look back into my own specific history, I can see that the moments where I really struggled, where I really made poor decisions, where I was out of alignment with myself, was due to this absence of integrity. And much of that was born of the lack of awareness over my values in the first place, because I had a very unconscious relationship to my values. It was never made explicit. So of course I trashed those rules and principles, and I lived in a way which was very unconsciously out of alignment with certain values that I hold dear, because I just simply wasn't conscious of them at the time, and I didn't know how to orient myself in the right way to be living in alignment. So in this episode, we're going to be covering a long list to really explore and pull apart this issue of integrity. I want to give you guys practical steps and strategies to orient yourself and live life in alignment with your values. We're going to talk about how to find your values and the process of overcoming our internal resistances and temptations to live out of alignment, and what it actually looks like to bring ourselves into this place of being aligned with our values, and how that's going to actually shape and transform the quality of our life. So to start with, let's understand and define integrity. This is a word we hear thrown around a lot. It's commonly phrased, and it's something that we all feel on a certain level or understand on a certain level, and yet it is holding within it many layers of depth that we are usually, or perhaps most of us, are unaware of. Put in the most simple terms, we can understand integrity as a form of alignment between our actions, our words, and our values. How we actually behave in the world, how we speak, and what we hold dear. There's a very big difference between a superficial form of honesty and speaking in a certain way, and a deeply held practice and commitment to integrity. Words are cheap in a certain sense, and actions and the way that we behave truly reflects our level of integrity. And it's something which we can't really fake. I mean, we can try to fake it, we can try to speak in a certain way, and we often do fake it. We love to convince ourselves that we're in integrity and lie to ourselves and bullshit, which hides a deeper layer of inconsistency. And actually living in alignment with our words and our values is actually quite challenging. Very challenging, in fact. And it takes a certain level of growth and maturity to be able to do this, which is why typically people who are undeveloped, unconscious, living life in an ad hoc kind of way, are usually not very intentional or very high integrity people. And that's not to diminish them. It's just, it requires a certain level of self-reflection and commitment and ruthless honesty. And we're going to talk about exactly how you can start developing that. Another way to think of it is integrity is living true to your values, and where we see this big alignment between your actions and words, which consistently matches what you truly believe in your heart. It's about being honest and reliable and really standing by your principles, even when no one else is watching. Which will be testing and very challenging, as we'll find out why and how that can easily be corrupted, because it's so easy to take shortcuts, to take the easy road, and to live in a certain way, fragmented. The etymology of the word integrity really conveys a sense of wholeness, completeness, to be integrated, to be integral. When a building has integrity, we think of it as being strong, cohesive, and safe. When a human being has integrity, we see them as being trustworthy, reliable, and somehow morally developed. You get the feeling what you see is what you get when you meet a person who has integrity. We can also understand integrity by what it is not. We've all met people that have little or no integrity because their words are out of alignment with their actions. They typically come across and give a feeling of being unscrupulous, shady, shifty, untrustworthy, suspicious, two-faced, saying one thing and then doing something completely different. Being friendly to your face and then speaking about you behind your back. Promising you one thing and then undermining you in a different way. That is an example of a lack of integrity, a misattunement, a misalignment. There's also a big difference between integrity and simple compliance. It's a very different thing to be living with integrity as opposed to merely following rules or societal norms. For example, the Nazis, or the people that were following the Nazi party, were following orders, perhaps on some level sensing that what they were doing was wrong in the persecution of the Jewish people, and yet nonetheless doing it anyway, because they were following orders. There's a misalignment there. Perhaps you hold human life as being sacred, and yet you're being forced or coerced or manipulated into completely disregarding human life on another level. Another example is telling the truth. We could say that that's like a socially held value. And perhaps we do that because we've been told that that's the right thing to do. Or you've been browbeaten into telling the truth by your parents. And yet that's very different than committing to telling the truth because it feels right, or it generates a feeling of wholeness or completeness in you, that you wish to live in alignment with the truth because that's a value that you hold dear. And some people are very loose with the truth. And there's a very direct correlation between the truth and integrity. And we'll talk about that in a lot more depth a little bit later on as we explore the specific nature of the highest values that we can have. So first, before I dive into that, I want to explain the significance and the importance of values in general. So really, we can see that values are essential for the development of integrity. The thing is that most of us receive our value system largely determined by our culture, the family that we were born in, and the country that we grew up and are a part of. We basically receive a download as a young being in this world of the default values of our culture and the living environment that we grew up in. That's why we can see in Catholic countries, people tend to get brought up with a Catholic or Christian value system. In Muslim countries, we see the same. In the West, we often get brought up with scientific values these days, a certain rational value system, a modern value system, or even postmodern value system, depending on the family that you grew up in. And this is really important to understand because we see that we receive this download unconsciously. We get programmed with a certain value system depending on the family, the culture, the society that we grow up in. And then we get to a certain stage of development where we start to self-reflect, and then we have to decide, what values are we keeping? What values actually feel right to us? And perhaps there's things that we need to cut, throw away, or augment. Perhaps there's things we need to add to our value system in order to become more whole, more complete. And generally, as we look at the stages of human development, we see this is largely defined by differentials in values. As human beings evolve and grow throughout their life, depending on their stages and levels of development, the value systems that we hold will shift. There's a difference between Republican and Democrat values, left and right, atheist or religious, spiritual, new age, progressive. In fact, many of the conflicts that we see bearing out in the world, we can see as a clash of values between different value systems at different stages of development. And this is a very, very interesting topic. I'll be doing a whole series of episodes on this in the future. I don't want to go too deeply into it now because it will suck up a lot of time and we have a lot of ground to cover just talking about this topic. But it's important to see that as a function of the bigger picture, the value systems that we hold and how that differs from place to place, from the era and time that we're living in, and the levels of development of the people around us, the society that we live in. It's really important that we see that it's actually really essential for us to start clarifying our core values, understanding and making explicit what those are. Because if we don't, we're simply unconsciously living out the values we've received from our culture. And that's where we can get into a lot of trouble. This is where we can easily become very ideological. We can start championing different causes or becoming very patriotic and defending our country and getting stuck or locked in a specific worldview. When it comes to this issue of integrity, it's really important for us to clarify what our values are so we know what we have to align ourselves with. By making this explicit and somehow very clear for us, we have a map in front of us to follow. We can think of our values as like, what is most important in life to you? If you were to write that down on a piece of paper and write down a list of 10 or 20 things, what's the most important things in life for you? Is it learning? Is it family? Is it your faith? Is it knowledge and wisdom, understanding, truth, integrity? And if we were to examine that list, we can see that you actually have a blueprint for happiness and fulfillment. If you lived your entire life in accordance with the values, that which you hold most dear, you would be extremely fulfilled. So we can see that this path of integrity is actually a path towards a life of deep alignment, a cohesive unification. And I really suggest that you do this practice of writing down a list of 10 or 20 things of what is most important in life to you, to see and make explicit what your values actually are. And there's a deep practice we can apply to this. It's something that I go into a lot of depth in the Conscious Masculine course, of really getting clear and ranking your values and really defining them, giving yourself a personal definition for each value that you have, to not just assume that you know what it is, to actually give yourself a concrete visual representation of what it looks like to live in alignment with those values. And that's a very powerful practice. And it really takes a certain commitment to your values in order to live in integrity with them. This is not something we just approach willy-nilly. It's actually something you need to dedicate specific time to really pulling it apart and making it very, very obvious to yourself, so you know whether you're in alignment with your values or whether you are out of alignment with your values. And that is really the crux of developing integrity. Are you true to yourself? Or are you slipping out of alignment with the things that you actually find and believe to be most important? It's really important to understand as well that this is not something we just do once. It's something that we need to consistently apply ourselves to. It's like forming a relationship with the compass that is actually guiding your life. Your values are literally pointing you towards true north all the time. And then if you are keeping your words, your actions, and your values in alignment consistently, you're keeping yourself on the right track. Pretty amazing thing to do. Very, very powerful thing to do. This will completely change the quality of your life. I guarantee you. Because this adherence and understanding of your value system really makes your decision-making process very easy. You know how common it is for us to get really stuck in our minds, confused, unsure what to do? I know I've had certainly many moments in my life where I was very confused. I didn't know how to act or behave. I wasn't sure which choice was the right choice to make. And I looped in that for years, stuck in turmoil, depressed, constantly anxious, worrying. What if I do this, or what if I do this? If I had known my values in the first place, it's clear. It's not always easy. The choices can still be very difficult, or the actions themselves hard to do. But there's no confusion about what's right or what's not. It's so much easier to see the path ahead of you when you have a clarified sense of alignment with your values. And as an example of that, if we, for example, hold faith, our religion, and we hold those values very dear, then we have a very clear metric and system for living in alignment with that. That is why a lot of people really value religion and still value religion, even though the world and many parts of the world are moving towards a more rational or scientific worldview. At a certain level of development, we need to have a code of honor, or a code of a book telling us how to live, or leaders in our life guiding our direction in a certain way towards God. Perhaps you hold family as a value, and you really need to orient yourself around the people that you hold dearest in your life, and you'll be devoted to them and commit to them and protect them. We can go further and hold more abstract notions like the truth as a value. Now, there's a big talk here between obviously the relative truth, subjective truth, and the absolute truth. And truth is a tremendous thing to hold as a value. We could hold responsibility, love, strength and honor, integrity. These can all be values. Personal growth and development, learning. Imagine you had a list of the most important concepts and principles which you know are the most important thing for you. You basically have a metric and a system with which you can pass through all the information, all the decisions that you need to make. Everything that happens in your life gets basically qualified through your value system, which is why people of a religious orientation will interpret everything through the lens of their faith. People who have a rational or scientific materialistic value system will pass and make sense of everything that comes through that lens in a rational way. People who have a more spiritual orientation or level of development, or have awakened higher consciousness, will interpret everything through that lens. And it's important that we don't just conform and unconsciously just move through life with the value system that we've inherited, but we want to actually make that process conscious within ourselves and do the work internally to actually understand what our values are, where do we sit, and how might we actually evolve through this process in a certain direction that actually enriches our value system. It's very important to acknowledge that our values actually do evolve over time. And we can see that evidenced in the way that people transform throughout their lives. Many people grow up in a certain level of development. We all go through different stages of development. Many people start their lives in a traditional culture or religion, and at a certain stage they progress out of that and decide to question things more scientifically and rationally. They might go beyond that and start to break down and look at the world through a more spiritual lens, or a more integrative lens where they can see the truth in many different perspectives and take the droplets of wisdom from every different perspective and create a more unified picture and map of life and of reality. It's important that we notice that the values that we hold will change over time, and that that's a good thing. And then the act of living in integrity is a dynamic process that is constantly changing and evolving as we grow and evolve. Very fascinating process. Very, very interesting to observe this happening within yourself. And essentially that process is actually teaching us to be very in touch with ourselves. As I look at the way my value system has changed in even just the last few years, it's tremendous. I went from a very rigid, dogmatic, ideological viewpoint and understanding of life, and broke free from that into a much more open-minded, holistic, integrated perspective on reality and myself and my place in the world. If I go further back, I can see my development from my university years, where I was programmed with a very scientific, rational, atheist perspective. Within the last 10 years, I can see myself moving through multiple stages of development, with the way that I acted in the world, with the way that I showed up in my relationships, with the way that I made sense of reality. Completely different. It's tremendous. And I'm sure you have your own path. You will have your own path. And it would be very interesting to look at where you are now and see how far you've come. It's profoundly satisfying because it gives you a lot of hope for the future. It helps you to understand where you're directing yourself. And it's really important to map out what the next steps might be. So we're not just unconsciously bumbling and stumbling our way through life, which we all do. At a certain point, we want to get to the stage where we're consciously analyzing, making sense, and moving up the scale of consciousness deliberately. And this path of integrity is really a map of how to do that, or like a principle that will guide us in that direction. If we stay true and commit to upholding a sense of integrity and living a life aligned with our values, our thoughts, our speech, and the way that we act, this is going to make some pretty profound and life-changing shifts occur in a very short period of time. So here we actually have almost like a cheat code, like a hack for personal growth and development that's going to help you really, really accelerate your level of understanding, and more than just that, how you're actually showing up in the world. And as I look at my own life, I can see I was acting many times completely out of alignment with my values, behaving in a way which was pretty shameful and regrettable. And that actually, the pain of that actually forced me to have a very hard look in the mirror and see the mistakes that I was making. And that has put me onto a much better path. So it's with the benefit of that wisdom and the hard experiences that I had to go through in order to learn this stuff that I'm sharing these insights with you, and hopefully giving you a bit of a roadmap and a blueprint to go through a similar level or stage of growth. Perhaps you've already been through certain stages of growth with this. Perhaps you have more to discover. So now I want to give you some practical steps to develop your state of integrity. And I'll give you a very distinct set of practical actions and principles we can follow. The first one being self-reflection and awareness. So we really need to commit to a regular practice of self-reflection. This is actually a hallmark of a certain stage of development when we really start to introspect. We start to meditate, we start to contemplate, we start to look in the mirror, figuratively speaking, and look back on our life and look at the mistakes that we've made, see where we are in alignment with our values and where we are out of alignment with our values. This is really the first step. It's so crucial. Journaling, contemplating with a journal, developing mindfulness practices, anything that's really starting to help you develop and enhance your self-awareness is going to be absolutely crucial. Because if you are not self-aware, how are you going to change anything? We need to sharpen that. The next principle is honesty and transparency. If you can't be honest, how are you ever going to be integral? We need to actually commit to being radically honest with ourselves in such a way that it really starts to honor you. Humans are fantastically clever at bullshitting and lying, not just to others, but also to ourselves. We need to be able to have a hard look in the mirror and be able to have difficult conversations and commit to showing up in a truthful way. The more you commit to integrity, the more you'll feel inspired to do so because it feels good. It feels authentic. It feels more real than just pretending to be a certain way in order to get what you want. We need to be able to communicate what's happening inside of us. We need to be honest about it. We need to be transparent to ourselves and others. Honest self-reflection. We need to be able to really admit our mistakes, to be able to say, I was wrong. That's the real test of honesty and transparency is, can you admit your mistakes? Can you assume responsibility for fixing things that you have broken? Are you actually open to receiving the feedback and reflection from others, especially those who are closest to you, because they're your closest mirror? The people in your life, they're reflecting you and your behavior and the words that come out of your mouth. Do you have the courage to be able to look at yourself with all of your flaws and admit your mistakes and commit to being better? Without that, you won't get very far because you are stuck in a very selfish, egotistical perspective. It's only through transparency and honesty and a certain openness that we actually benefit from the reflection of others and see that they are actually giving us a gift, even if it's a difficult one. Because if you value personal growth and development, that's one of the fastest ways to transform. We also want to commit to setting and maintaining boundaries. Boundaries are effectively the borders that we have between us and others, which uphold or protect our values and allow us to live in alignment. Which is not always easy. It's quite a difficult thing to do, especially if you've grown up with weak boundaries or as a nice guy or nice girl. I just did an episode on that recently. If you are interested in understanding nice guy syndrome or people-pleasing tendencies, go and watch that episode. In order to progress through that and to develop healthy boundaries, we need to be able to communicate the things that we value. I value my personal space. I value being talked to in a respectful way. I value the people around me telling me the truth, not lying to my face. Those are all examples of boundaries that I could uphold. I need to be able to communicate that in an effective way and be able to negotiate the maintenance of those boundaries. Of course, we need to understand what our values are in the first place. Otherwise, how can we defend what we're not aware of? Most of the times when my boundaries were overridden by other people in my life was because I wasn't explicitly aware of the values and the needs and my feelings underneath that. So I would let myself get walked all over until I realized that actually my needs are important. I deserve to feel safe. I deserve to feel respected. Then it became much easier to uphold my boundaries because I knew exactly what I was defending and exactly why I was defending it. Doesn't mean defending my boundaries is easy. Sometimes it's very challenging. It's very confronting. But at least I know what the decision is. I know what I'm defending. I know it's easy. It's an easy choice to make because my compass is showing me that this is something that's important to me. And it's more important to me to defend this or to advocate for this certain thing than it is for me to let it be walked over. I would rather face the discomfort of having a difficult conversation to establish a clear boundary with someone than to live out of integrity with that value. Because that ultimately degrades my sense of self. It degrades my self-worth. It undermines my confidence. And that's not something I'm willing to accept. I used to accept that, but not anymore. The fourth principle I want to talk about is accountability and responsibility. It's so important that we actually take responsibility for our actions. Again, another place where I used to fall woefully short. If you can't take responsibility for your actions, how are you ever going to change and improve and upgrade yourself? You're going to keep yourself in a kind of victim, weak, disempowered state. Whereas when we take responsibility, we are really aligning ourselves with the truth of what we are doing and the impact that we are having on others. That's when you start living for more than just yourself. You see and connect this idea that your actions, the way that you speak, the way that you show up in the world has a direct impact on other people. And if you take responsibility for that, you're taking responsibility for not just your own well-being, your own needs, your own selfish desires, but also the needs and desires and the feelings and the values of those around you, which is a beautiful thing to be able to offer. It's a more conscious state because you are basically not just wrapping yourself in love, but you are wrapping those around you in a state of love and care and responsibility. And that's actually a measure of your level of consciousness. How much do you care and take responsibility for? Is it just you, or do you take responsibility and care for your family, your tribe, your country, the world, or all living things, or the entirety of reality? The more conscious you become, the more you identify with a broader and broader set of things and beings. And we can see our level of development mirrored in what we actually take accountability for and what we show up and take responsibility for. And that starts with the self, that starts with your own sense of self and really owning that. And then that starts to expand. And the real measure of a man is how much he can actually expand that. And the truly exemplary beings on this planet are the ones that are taking responsibility and accountability for the whole of humanity. Now, I don't expect you to start there. That's obviously quite a high level to reach, but that's where this work leads. And that brings tremendous levels of fulfillment and gratification and deep meaning and significance, instead of just taking care of your own selfish, egotistic needs or the needs that you have which you're deficient in, which is fine. It's important that you do that. But it's also just important that we don't stop at that level. We want to keep expanding, keep taking accountability and responsibility for more and more and more, because that's what it means to evolve spiritually. It's really important that we develop a support system around us that actually fosters this kind of accountability. We want to have mentors, coaches, teachers that really inspire us to be more responsible and be more accountable and align ourselves with this process of integrity, of living like this. We can really benefit from having accountability partners or people in our lives, close friends, people that we share this work with, men's groups, women's groups. This kind of thing can be very, very instrumental to help us, to basically call us forward and to call out the best qualities inside of us and to help us live for more. This is a very powerful resource that we need to develop in our lives. We want to have people that can really give us honest reflection and tell us the truth, the difficult truths sometimes that we don't want to hear, but we need to hear. It's a very powerful process or quality to have in your life, to get that feedback. And to also just feel inspired by the people around us, to be called into the highest version of ourselves. It's so crucial. So those are the steps that I wanted to outline in terms of actually developing integrity. We really need to understand what our core values are and then start the process of bringing our words, actions, and values into alignment. And there's a variety of different ways that we can commit to that. And we want to basically permeate those concepts and those principles throughout our life and make this decision that, hey, I actually want to know what my values are. I want to live in alignment with them. And I want the people around me to support that process. And I want to evolve and grow through this process. And then we're on a very interesting path. Next, let's look at some of the challenges in actually maintaining integrity, because it's really not that simple. I've made it sound quite simple, but in practice, it's actually really, really hard. It's really difficult because we have a lot of internal conflict happening inside of us. So we really need to learn how to recognize and resolve these internal conflicts that really undermine our sense of integrity. And really, as I look back on my life and some of the situations that I found myself in and created for myself, I can see that there was this massive internal war. Somehow feeling in my heart that what I was doing was wrong, or it was out of alignment for me, but stuck in this loop, repeating the same patterns, being dishonest, lying, hiding certain truths about myself in order to get what I wanted, in order to get a certain superficial validation. I was prepared to be very loose with the truth, omit and tell white lies and hide certain things, because that would have made things more difficult, or I would have been forced to make a tough decision, or I potentially would have lost the things that I wanted. This happened a lot in my relationships, especially. Now, I know underneath that was a good intention, which is like I felt like I wasn't getting my needs met and I wanted to get my needs met. But I was somehow deluding myself and thinking that in order to get my needs met, it was okay to lie. Which, looking back on it now, looks pretty shady. And I can see that that was pretty out of integrity because I actually really value the truth. And now I would rather give up what I want on the superficial level or certain needs that I have because I value the truth too much or so much that I'm not really willing to compromise that anymore. Because, okay, maybe if you lie, you do get what you want. And that's why lying is so sneaky and tempting, because when we lie, it's actually easier to get what we want. Have you noticed that? That's why politicians lie all the time. They have very low intellectual integrity or moral integrity. They'll say one thing today, they'll say a completely different thing tomorrow. Look at Donald Trump. Very low integrity. And in my own unique ways, I was doing the same thing, saying one thing and then behaving in a completely different way. And that process of getting myself out of those kind of low integrity behaviors and patterns was really getting clear on my values and seeing that actually the truth is something that I really value. It's really important to me to live my life aligned with the truth. Integrity is really important to me to basically live and align my words with my actions. I want to be a man of my word, where my word is my bond and people can trust that. I don't want other people to think of me as the guy who says one thing and does another. That doesn't feel very good. That doesn't really reflect the way that I see myself. I want to be the kind of person that people look at and say, man, that dude is very integral. I trust him. He feels safe to be around. He's a responsible man. I really want to create safety for my woman so she can feel safe to open up to me and go through her deep inner processes and share her most vulnerable parts. So integrity for me is a deep commitment to creating a safe relationship. And that means I needed to weed out and extract these tendencies of myself, which still exist inside of me, that would rather hide the truth, that would rather not have that difficult conversation, which would rather maybe tell a white lie in order to avoid confrontation, conflict. So in order to do that, I had to learn how to actually communicate. I needed to learn how to deal with conflict because I was so uncomfortable with conflict that I would rather lie in order to avoid it. You see how that works? Kind of sneaky, very sneaky. So in order to stop lying, I needed to develop the skills that would enable me to face what was a very confronting, emotionally challenging situation, which is telling the truth sometimes. And admitting certain harsh, uncomfortable truths about myself. Yes, I did this thing. Yes, I behaved in this way. Yes, I know it was wrong. And I'm sorry. And I'm not just going to give lip service to that and say that I'm sorry. I'm actually going to prove with my actions that I'm taking responsibility for that mistake and that I'm committed to repairing. That's what the process of getting back into integrity has looked like for me. A deep, very hard look in the mirror to admit, hey, this is where I fucked up. This is what I did wrong. This is why I did it. And this is what I'm going to do about it to make sure that I don't repeat that mistake again. At the heart of it, I had to learn to really feel when I was in integrity and when I was out. Your intuition and your gut will tell you the truth. Because deep down, you know. You fucking know. You just love to lie to yourself and you love to bullshit and give yourself reasons or excuses or easy ways out to weasel out of it. We need to start becoming more ruthless and really prepared to admit, I'm out of integrity here. I did it last week. There was something that I was omitting from my partner, not telling her about, and it had been sitting with me and festering inside of me because I knew it was something that I had to say. It was going to be a difficult conversation because I knew she wasn't going to be happy about it. She was going to have a difficult emotional reaction, which I would have to be able to sit with and create safety for her to have that. And that would make me feel guilty and shameful for not telling the truth straight away. But I had to commit to the process. I wanted to be back in integrity. And I could feel this icky sensation of knowing that there was something which I wasn't speaking, which was out of alignment with the way that I was acting. And I wanted to bring those things back together. So I had to go and approach her and said, hey, there's something that I want to talk to you about. I had to lay it out. Of course, she had her emotional reaction. And I had already come up with a plan of what I was going to do about it, to give her the reassurance that this wasn't just a here we go again, but it was like a new octave of the challenge in which I had understood something, I had integrated, I had committed to telling the truth, and I had brought it to her attention. So, of course, it wasn't perfect. Would have been better if I just told her from the very beginning, but in this situation, I was able to at least bring resolution after the fact, and I learned something important about myself. And we got to progress to a deeper level in our relationship. So we really need to develop this capacity to feel if we're in integrity or if we're out of integrity. Start checking in with yourself regularly. Start noticing these sensations inside of you, this alarm bell ringing, this sensation of feeling a little bit off, a little bit sick. If it's something that your mind is continually returning to and thinking about, chances are you might be out of integrity. I have a saying which I've adopted, which I like to share, which is if you're in doubt, if you're not sure if you're in or out, chances are that you're probably out. And then it's time to talk it out and come clean and have those difficult conversations and navigate it in the best way. Because at the end of the day, you win, even if you're out of integrity, even if you've lied, even if you've done something shameful, even if you've made a tremendous mistake. And that might cause some drastic consequences in your life. That might lead to some very difficult situations or conversations that you need to have. You win by living in alignment with the value itself. You commit to telling the truth. You commit to coming clean. You commit to owning your mistakes and atoning in order to get yourself back into integrity. And it's that action, it's exactly that process that you repeat again and again and again and again, such to the point that you no longer commit or you no longer stumble and find yourself out of integrity. Keep committing, keep coming back, be ruthless in your approach, and show and demonstrate time and time again that you're committed to living in alignment. That's the messy process of getting yourself back into integrity, which is the consequence of yourself being out of integrity in the first place. And that's a price that you should be willing to pay, because that's really what's going to grow you. That's really what's going to transform your approach, your relationships. You're going to develop much more trust, much deeper intimacy, much more profound depth of connection. I hope you can see the significance of that and how important it is. So that's not the only challenge we have to face. We also get a lot of external pressure. It's not always easy to live in integrity because we have a lot of large scale forces, societal expectations, cultural norms, the complexity of our relationships can often really, really challenge our integrity. Other people have expectations of us. We have long, interconnected, entwined relationships. There's all of society's standards and norms and the culture that we live in that is pressing down upon us, pushing us into a certain mold of a certain character development, of a certain good citizen. And depending on your level of development, you might find yourself advancing beyond that. And culture is a difficult thing because culture, we get dragged, we get a free ride, we get brought up to the level of the norms and values of our culture, which is great, but it's not the ultimate. There's a lot more room for growth and development beyond the collective level of development. Because culture changes very slowly. It takes hundreds or thousands of years for a culture to evolve through different stages of development, whereas we, the individual human, can develop much more fast, much more rapidly, and culture will have a tendency to pull us back down. If you grew up in a very orthodox religious culture, of course you get brought up to that level, but if you want to go beyond that, if you want to start being scientific or rational, if you want to start being integrative or spiritual, your culture is going to try and bring you back down. So we need to be aware of that process and we need to be able to counterbalance that and approach that in a wise way. And that will be a test of your own integrity. If your values are different from your culture's, there is going to be a shift or a rift, a schism of sorts in that you're going to have to learn how to navigate. Other external pressures involve the nature of power. When human beings start to be in positions of power, there is a tendency for corruption. There's a tendency for an abuse of that power. We're easily tempted and seduced. Our ego loves it, loves to be in a position of power because we've spent most of our life feeling rather powerless, especially as young beings. And as we start to get into positions of power, as we start to accumulate experiences, the ego loves to co-opt all of that and convince us that we deserve to, or we're entitled to, or we can get away with certain actions, certain behaviors that might be very out of alignment with our value system and our integrity. Just look at the way that so many politicians and celebrities behave. People in the public eye, people in positions of great power and influence. That power comes with a price, and the price is often corruption in various different ways. So as you move through your life, if you find yourself being in a position of power or influence, notice that has a tendency to corrupt your value system. We need to be very, very lucid, very aware of that. That's a tremendous test. All in all, we need to see and commit to staying in alignment and staying true to our values. There's an incredible, somehow priceless value to staying in alignment with your values, despite the external pressures of your culture, of the position that you find yourself in life. Because it's in the temptation and it's in the challenge. That's where we grow the most. when you are tempted and seduced or perhaps encouraged to stray from your values, those are the moments where we really need to choose and understand why we're choosing to live in alignment with our values. That's the moment when your dedication is really tested, and that's when you can take your life to the next level, because you say no. Telling the truth is more important to me than me getting sex or getting some money. Money is very tempting because it directly benefits our survival. So is sex. These are two areas where we'll find a lot of temptation, a lot of tendency to get corrupted in our values. And those are the moments when we really level up our internal commitment and self-worth. Because if you're really aligned with your values and you're able to refuse the temptation or say no, even if it hurts your survival, even if you earn less money, you get less sex, you have less power, but at least within that, you know why you did that and you did it for the right reasons. Very powerful, very, very powerful. That's going to be worth more to you than all the money in the world, because there's plenty of rich motherfuckers out there who got their wealth by being out of integrity, by being low integrity creatures, basically hoarding wealth or, seducing that wealth or convincing other people to give them all of that wealth. And that comes with a corrupting factor, corrupting influence, because they are low integrity. Their word means nothing. And we don't want to be like that. We want to be better than that. We want to be more, higher quality. And that's an intrinsic internal value which no one can take away from you. You carry that till the end of your days. Knowing that you live in integrity is profoundly enriching. It's worth more to me than all the money in the world. If I had to sacrifice my integrity to get all this money, to get millions and millions of dollars, I won't do it. Because I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Or I could, but the relationship with myself would be so damaged. It's not worth it. It's really not worth it. I love myself too much to allow myself to go in that direction. So next, I want to talk about how we can deal with the failures that will inevitably find us on this path, because you're going to fail. You've already failed. You're probably failing right now in certain ways with your integrity. And we need to be able to handle these situations where we fall short. It's really important that we are forgiving and realize that we need to learn through the mistakes that we make. In fact, the mistakes are essential in order for us to learn. I never would have learned how to live in integrity if I hadn't made my mistakes, if I hadn't fucked things up, if I hadn't felt the tremendous pain and sufferance of living out of integrity. So understand that that is an integral part of developing integrity. You're going to make mistakes. Welcome the mistakes. Those are the opportunities where you really get to make huge leaps forward. Relationships are the next sort of area that I wanted to discuss. It's really important. It's one of the most important things for building trust and for actually showing up authentically in your relationship. Integrity is somehow the foundation of that. Knowing what your values are and living in alignment with them is really going to enable you a path to committing, to being truthful, to showing up authentically, to developing the skills that are going to be necessary in order for you to do that with someone else. That's going to make or break the relationship, really. So we can see that this lack of alignment or being out of integrity is the thing that's going to break our relationships. And committing to bringing ourselves into alignment is the thing that's going to really make our relationships go to the next level. And that makes the decision-making process in the relationship so much easier, because you deep down, you know what you should be doing. You know what the right thing is. You're able to communicate and have those difficult conversations, and that is a game changer. It clears up so much of the room for error and the misalignment and misattunement and miscommunications that we have, which is really the main thing that fucks up every relationship, is a miscommunication and a misalignment of values. So really getting clear on those, getting your partner to get clear, or inviting them to share this process with you, super powerful. And I'll share as well some practices shortly of how you can really start defining and getting clear on this stuff for yourself. I'll give you some homework in just a second, so you can take this process into your own life and really start to embody these principles that I'm talking about. I just want to mention before that there is a direct correlation between the quality of leadership that we're able to embody in our lives and our level of integrity. As we look around the world, we can see world leaders who are very low integrity beings. And if we look back in history, we can see some examples of leaders or, people that really changed history because of their level of integrity. People like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., who really took a stand for non-violent protest to change human rights, who were locked up and imprisoned and willing to be putting themselves and exposing themselves to tremendous harm in order to live in alignment with their values of that which they hold most dear, human rights and civil rights. That's a beautiful, shining example of leadership. And didn't that change the world? Didn't that impact humanity? Didn't that echo throughout history as men or people or beings who stood for more than just their own selfish interests? So that's worth contemplating and sitting with, and in fact emulating. We can learn a lot from these people. I want to also create an understanding here of the bigger picture. We need to look at the spiritual dimension of integrity, because this is where this work finds its highest expression. And in a certain way, as I was thinking about this topic and brainstorming this talk, I was really starting to see that integrity is this issue, is this concept that really helps us to align our lower self, the ego mind, with our higher self, or the absolute truth. If integrity means wholeness and completeness, at the highest level, we need to become complete and whole with reality. And at the highest spiritual states that we can achieve, we have a non-dual perspective, which is everything is one. So essentially, the path of integrity at the highest level is the integration of the lower self with the higher self, where we dissolve our finite, limited ego into the infinite ocean of absolute truth, or infinity. And then we really get an understanding and an insight into the real perspective of spiritual growth, because we see the truth. We see, in a certain way, the full picture. And as our consciousness evolves, we become more and more unified, more and more complete, more and more whole. So the path of integrity leads us from the finite ego towards a complete identification with all of reality. Pretty incredible. So as I look back on my path as well, I can see that the majority of my struggles were a lack of integrity, a misalignment with my values, and an absorption or fascination or addiction to getting my needs met in low integrity ways. That involved me really starting to develop myself, starting to expand my level of consciousness, starting to understand things from a more big picture perspective, and realize where my personal story was occurring in the broader spectrum, in the broader story of humanity. And then I started to unify that and really started to take responsibility for my life, for the world that I'm living in, for the culture that I'm growing up in. And that's my path. That's my process of becoming more conscious and becoming more developed. I've seen how the mistakes that I made in my relationships were a direct reflection of my lack of integrity, and I've started to correct those by being ruthless in my honesty, responsibility, and self-reflections. And I really, really encourage you guys to get into alignment with this. I want you to start reflecting on your own experiences of integrity or lack of integrity. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Let me know some of the moments in your life when you were out and how you got yourself back in, some of the deepest lessons that you've learned and how that's transformed the quality of your life or your relationship. This is a very juicy topic, and the more we bring the shadows out of the darkness and into the light and have them purified, the more joyful and liberating this process becomes. I've tried to share with you some of my own mistakes and the things that I've done in the hope that that inspires you to get yourself into integrity. Join me in this place. It's a great place to be. And trust me, your relationship, your partner, your family, the people you care about will feel this difference in you, and they will feel inspired by that. It's a beautiful thing to become a person of deep integrity. And I really want to leave you guys with some practices to help enhance this process. I really suggest writing about your core values, writing down on a piece of paper with a pen, set 30 minutes on your timer on your phone. At the top of the page, write about what is most important in life to me and see what you come up with. Brainstorm 10, 20 ideas. This is going to help you get closer to understanding what your values are. You might like to experiment communicating those boundaries with the people around you, the values themselves, and then starting to work on the boundaries that we need in order to uphold those. Very powerful practice. That might highlight some deficiencies in your skill sets, in your relational intelligence, in your emotional intelligence. And if you find yourself at a severe deficiency in skill in this area and you feel like you need support, that's exactly what this channel and what my courses and the group community, the men's group that I run, is based around. We're all practicing this and trying to embody this and trying to learn how to be men of integrity. So if that calls to you, check out the link in the description of this video. You might like to come and join us on this path, conscious masculine path. I really appreciate your feedback so much. I've got amazing feedback from the last video that I made, the one about nice guy syndrome and people-pleasing tendencies. It really touches my heart and fills me with profound gratitude, knowing that this work is landing and you guys are appreciating it and that it's inspiring you. That's really why I'm doing this, because I just love passing this on and gifting these insights and really creating something of value. That's my own commitment to my values, which is yeah, creativity and giving back. Contribution is one of my top 10 values. So here I am living in alignment with my value of contribution, contributing something worthy, valuable, insightful, useful, meaningful, as an expression of my own love for reality and for people. Integrity isn't just this fluffy, idealistic notion. I share this because I'm trying to live it, and I'm trying to show you guys what it likes to live, what it looks like to live in alignment with your values. I've shaped my entire career, my relationship, the way I live my life, my diet, everything is oriented and filtered through the lens of my values and my integrity to them. So this is really where our work of philosophy and self-development meets the real world. It's where the rubber hits the road. This is when we really need to align our thoughts and our words with how we show up, with our actions. And really, it's a path for life. This is a commitment that I'm inviting you to take, which is going to help you advance through stages of development at a rapid pace, because it's going to give you a tremendous idea and understanding of where you are now, the ways that you fucked up in the past and the mistakes that you made and why those happened, how we can integrate those to form a better path going forward, a more honest, transparent, integrous, responsible path that is beneficial not just for you, but for humanity, because that's what this world needs. That's what consciousness is demanding, that we go through this evolutionary process, that we expand our level of development, and we give that back and we contribute. And like this, we can actually make the world a much better place to live in for ourselves, for our children, for the generations to come. Isn't that worth living for? Isn't that worth making hard decisions, having difficult conversations, committing to really living and embodying that? For me, that's something I could die for. In the episode about what is death, where I talked about the insights from losing my father, that was the final insight, was what are you willing to die for? For me, this commitment to integrity, commitment to truth, that's worth dying for. And it's when we actually awaken ourselves, when we reach higher states of consciousness, when we have a non-dual awakening, when we become God realized, then we actually get a perspective. Then we realize how far and how deep the rabbit hole goes. When you awaken, in a certain sense, you realize that your entire life has been out of integrity, because you see from the absolute infinite truth perspective who and what you really are. And you come back to your normal state of consciousness and realize that you don't even know what's real. And thus begins the gradual and very slow process, the very arduous, fascinating, mysterious process of integrating your finite self with your infinite self. So as we begin this journey, it's a process of cleaning up the past, showing up better in the present, and working towards a future in which we understand everything, in which we're no longer living in a false understanding or an ignorant perspective, but one where we really can zoom out enough and really understand everything. Understand reality, understanding who you are, understanding what this game is, and why you chose to be here right now. That's a very deep topic. That's a can of worms. I know I've left you with a a mind-boggling insight, and that's something we'll be talking about a lot in the future. For some of you, this might seem completely woo-woo, difficult to understand, but trust me, it's something I don't just want you to take my word for it. This is something you can directly verify in your direct experience once you awaken. Once you have those states of awakening, I'll be sharing exactly how you can reach that, how I reached it multiple times, many, many times, and how I'll continue to access those states and how much that pulled my understanding and my level of development upwards. I'm going to be sharing exactly how to do that in future episodes, so stick with me. Things are going to get juicy. And we're going to go as deep as the rabbit hole goes, so to speak. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to hearing your feedback and sharing the conversation in the comments. Go do that homework now. Get clear on your values. Start noticing where you're in integrity and where you've been out of integrity. And let's start correcting that. It's one of the best things you'll ever do. Trust me. There's nothing quite like living your life aligned with the truth.